The wind whispered through the godswood of River Run, carrying the scent of pine and river mud. Robb Stark stood under the weirwood tree, its red leaves fluttering above him like blood-soaked feathers. He had dismissed his guards, leaving only grey wind lounging near the roots. His face was grim, jaw clenched, as he unrolled the weathered parchment once more, the one his mother had found hidden in Lord Eddard Stark's private effects. It was not a battle plan. It was not a letter of farewell. It was a secret that could fracture kingdoms. Jon Snow, his half-brother, or rather his cousin, was the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, legitimate, the true heir to the Iron Throne. The North's bastard had more right to rule than any Baratheon or Lannister. Robb didn't know whether to feel betrayed or honoured that his father had trusted no one with this, not even Catelyn, but something deeper than betrayal swam inside. Him, a sense of duty, the kind only a Stark would understand. He let out a long breath, finally tucking the parchment into his cloak. He didn't trust Maesters, not anymore. Too many loyalties, too many whispered messages to the south, too many eyes watching every northern move. A voice behind him broke his silence. "You summon me, your grace?" It was Lord Rickard Karstark, loyal, dangerous, and deeply vengeful. Robb didn't look up. "What would you say if I told you there was a better way to win this war than sword and blood?" Karstark frowned, stepping closer. "I'd say the South doesn't bleed easy, but I'm listening." Robb turned finally, his eyes colder than the river in deep winter. "The South bleeds for dragons." By nightfall, a secret council gathered in River Run's great hall, cloaked in silence. Catelyn sat nearest her son, looking pale and wary. The Blackfish watched from the shadows, and even the Greatjon lowered his usual boisterous tone. Robb stood, holding the parchment. "This was written by my father. Not a word of it is to leave this room." He let them read it, slowly, one by one. Silence stretched as the truth rippled across their faces. "A Targaryen," Catelyn breathed. "Jon is Rhaegar's son?" "And Lyanna's," Robb said. "Married in secret, legitimate." "Then he is no Snow," murmured Lord Umber. "He is Aegon Targaryen." Blackfish Brynden let out a dry chuckle. "And has more right to the throne than any sitting king, even Renly, even Stannis." Catelyn shook her head. This changes everything. The war, the alliances. "You're king in the north, Robb. You can't bend the knee now." "I won't," Robb said firmly. "But what if we didn't have to choose between independence and chaos? What if there was a way to end this war without sacrificing every northern life?" The room shifted uncomfortably. The young wolf continued. "We use the truth quietly. We reach out to those who've suffered under the Lannisters, Dorne, the Vale, even the Stormlands. We tell them there's a Targaryen heir alive, one raised by the Starks, one they can trust." "Jon wouldn't want the crown," Catelyn said. "He never cared for titles." "Then we wear it for him," Robb replied. "I don't want the Iron Throne. I want peace, for the North, for our people. If Jon's name brings us allies, ends this war, then we protect him. We hide him, guide him, and when the time is right, we present him as Westeros's rightful king." The council debated until the candles burned low. In the end, it was the Blackfish who summed it up best. "If we're to play the Game of Thrones, best we play with truth and fire at our backs." Far across the land, Jon Snow stared into the snow-swept void beyond the wall, unaware of the storm gathering behind him, of the legacy hidden in his blood, of the crown that might yet become his burden. And Robb Stark, the young wolf, began weaving a new kind of rebellion, one not of blades and banners, but secrets and bloodlines. For he knew even a wolf needed a dragon to tear down a lion. The morning after the council, Robb sat alone in his chambers, rereading the letter again, even though he had memorized every word. The truth felt heavier with each passing hour, not lighter. A war was easier to fight than a secret like this. His mind wandered to Jon, quiet, loyal Jon, forever cast to the side, always the bastard, the watcher of shadows. What would he say? If he knew, would he accept the truth, or would he turn from it, stubborn as ever? There was no time to ponder that. Robb knew that the longer this secret was kept, the more dangerous it became. Someone would talk. Secrets were knives waiting to cut their keepers, so he did what Ned Stark would have done. He acted. A rider was dispatched in the dead of night, riding under no banners, with no companions. He carried a letter for Jon Snow at Castle Black, and instructions only the bastard would understand. It was a risk, but Robb had no choice. If Jon were truly a Targaryen, his place was not with the Night's Watch, not anymore. Catelyn opposed the decision fiercely when she found out. "You would put your trust in that boy, Rhaegar's son. He is not one of us, Robb." Robb's face hardened. "He is as much a Stark as I am. My father raised him. I will not turn my back on him now." "You're risking everything, your crown, your people." "No," Robb interrupted. "I'm giving them a future, a real one." The message he sent to Jon was simple but enough. "You are not who you believe you are. Come to me. The truth awaits." Meanwhile, the war did not wait. In the Riverlands, Lannister patrols grew bolder. They sensed something shifting in the north. Tywin Lannister was too seasoned a player to ignore strange movements. Ravens intercepted. Bannermen missing. Unusual silence from Riverrun. Something was brewing, and he knew it. In the council at Harrenhal, Tywin narrowed his eyes at the reports. "The boy's gone quiet," he said, glancing at Kevan and the mountain. "That's not like the young wolf." "He's bleeding, surely," Kevan offered. "Retreating, maybe." "No, he's planning." Tywin's voice was calm, but deadly. "Send spies, watch the roads, follow the ravens. Something's changed in the north." The old lion wasn't wrong. Weeks passed. Then, one evening, under the fading light of dusk, Jon Snow arrived at Riverrun. He rode alone, his cloak torn, and his expression unreadable. Grey Wind barked once as he approached, as if sensing the fire in him had shifted. Robb met him at the gates, not as a king, but as a brother. Jon dismounted, eyes searching Robb's. "Is it true?" Robb didn't answer at first. He simply placed the letter, Ned's letter, into Jon's hand. Jon read it in silence. His breath hitched, and when he finished, he didn't speak. He walked away, needing air, needing to be alone. Hours passed before he returned to Robb's chambers. "I'm not Stark. You're more Stark than any man I've known," Robb said quietly. "Our father, our uncle, raised you like his own. His blood is in you. You're not just Snow, you're Aegon Targaryen." Jon looked at him, bitter. "Then why do I feel nothing but shame?" "Because we were raised in the north," Robb said. "We don't ask for crowns, but sometimes they find us." In the shadows, eyes watched their reunion. One of them belonged to Roose Bolton. He had heard enough. Roose Bolton didn't sleep that night. He sat alone in his tent, candlelight flickering across his pale face, the sound of dripping water echoing softly off the stone walls of Riverrun's inner keep. His mind was a swirling storm. A Targaryen, heir. Jon Snow, no, Aegon, the bastard-turned-prince, the Stark boy placing his trust in a dragon's blood. Dangerous, reckless. Roose had pledged his loyalty to House Stark, but loyalty had its limits. He had followed Robb because he believed in the old ways, the North for the North, not for dragons, not for southern games. He dipped a quill in ink and began writing. Not to King's Landing, no. That would be suicide. No, he had someone else in mind, a man who hated Targaryens more than Lannisters ever could, a man who would see this secret for the threat it truly was. Stannis Baratheon. Jon stayed at Riverrun, refusing the luxurious chambers offered to him. He kept to the battlements, walked alone at night, and trained with the soldiers like he had back at Castle Black. But something was different in him now. His silence was heavier, his stare colder. Robb watched him from afar, unsure of how to help. They shared blood, yes, but they no longer shared the same destiny. One evening, as the sun set in amber streaks across the river, Robb joined him by the wall. "You haven't said much." "What is there to say?" Jon muttered. "The world I knew is gone. My father wasn't my father. I've no claim to the wall and no place in the north." "You have a place with me." Jon shook his head. "You think I should be king?" "I think you already are." Jon turned sharply. "You're mad." "No," Robb said calmly. "You're the son of Rhaegar and Lyanna, married in secret, born under the protection of my father. You are Aegon Targaryen, sixth of his name, the rightful heir to the Iron Throne." "I don't want it." "Good," Robb replied. "That means you're not blind like the rest of them." Whispers grew. Some men noticed Jon and began asking questions. Why had a brother of the Night's Watch abandoned his post? Why did he wear no black? Why was he being counseled privately by the king in the north? Robb had tried to keep the secret tight, but secrets in wartime were like open wounds. Sooner or later, they festered. Catelyn came to him one morning, her eyes sunken with worry. "They're talking, your men, even the cooks. Jon's presence, it stirs unease." "I need him," Robb said. "He gives us legitimacy, options." "He gives us danger," Catelyn snapped. "If Tywin Lannister learns the truth, if Stannis, I know the risks." "No," she said, softer now. "You don't." She handed him another letter. This one bore the seal of Rose Bolton. At Dragonstone, Stannis Baratheon read the parchment with a burning fury. Melisandre stood beside him, her red eyes dancing in the candlelight. "A Targaryen boy," Stannis growled. "Another pretender to my throne." Melisandre placed a hand on the parchment. "If he is of dragons' blood, he may be the one I saw in the flames." Stannis turned away from her, disgusted. "I am the rightful king." "Yes," she said with a strange smile, "but fire chooses its own path." Back in the Riverlands, Robb gathered his closest men. "The secret is slipping. We act now, or we lose control of the story." "You'll crown him?" asked the Great Jon, surprised. "No, we reveal him slowly, as an ally, as a rallying banner for those who still remember the old Targaryens. We use his blood, not his name." Jon stepped forward. "No, if I'm going to be used, then I will speak. If the truth must be known, it will come from me." Robb nodded. "Then speak, brother. Tell the realm who you are." The raven flew south the next morning. Its message simple: Aegon Targaryen lives. The raven's message arrived in King's Landing just before dawn. It passed through the hands of nervous couriers and suspicious guards before landing on the desk of Queen Cersei Lannister. She read the parchment once, then again, her face tightening with every word. Aegon Targaryen lives. She didn't scream, didn't shatter a goblet or summon the mountain to crush skulls. Instead, she sat in silence, eyes locked on the words, breathing shallow and slow. The dead prince had left a son, and that son was under the protection of the North. "This cannot be," she whispered. Tyrion, summoned hastily, took one, looked at the parchment and understood the gravity immediately. "If this is true, Robb Stark has a better claim to the Iron Throne than he ever dreamed." "No," Cersei snapped. "That boy Jon Snow is a bastard. He is nothing." Tyrion frowned. "Not if Rhaegar and Lyanna were married. That changes everything." She slammed her fist on the desk. "Then we kill him. Both of them. The wolf and the dragon." "Even with every assassin in the realm," Tyrion said, "you'll never reach Jon Snow now, not with northern blades and Stark loyalty surrounding him." Cersei stood. "Then we bleed the north until it surrenders. The corpse of its king." Robb knew the south would react. He doubled the guards at River Run and sent riders to every bannerman, reinforcing the command to keep Jon's identity a secret or risk being labelled traitors to the north. But fear was creeping in now. Not just fear of war, but of betrayal, the kind that grew in the shadows. And in the shadows, Bolton watched it all unfold. He had received no reply from Stannis, but the silence told him enough. Things were moving. Forces larger than Robb understood were in play. The boy was too honourable, too much like his father, and too weak to see the blade coming. Jon was changing, too. Each day he walked through River Run's halls, eyes watching, whispers trailing behind him. He trained harder, spoke less. The truth sat heavy on his shoulders. Some soldiers bowed to him now, not out of command, but reverence. He hated it. In the barracks, a young archer named Tormund asked one night, "Is it true then? Are you the Dragon Prince?" Jon didn't answer. He simply kept wrapping his bandaged hand, the skin still healing from his last training match. Tormund nodded, as if that silence was its own truth. "Then gods help us." In the War Council, the maps changed. Robb pointed at Dawn. They hated the Lannisters. They still grieved for Elia Martell, Rhaegar's wife. "They might see Jon as a betrayal," said Lord Glover, "or as justice." "We won't know unless we ask," Robb said. "Send riders, careful ones." "And Daenerys?" Catelyn asked. "She still lives across the sea, the girl with dragons." "We avoid her," Robb replied, "for now. 2 Targaryens could be unity, or war." Jon finally spoke. "She has dragons. If I truly share her blood, perhaps they'll recognize it." "No," Robb said, firm. "We don't risk you like that. You're safer here." Jon narrowed his eyes. "I'm not here to be safe. I came because of truth, and now the realm is burning for it." That night, Robb sat by the fire in his chambers, exhausted. Catelyn entered quietly, holding something wrapped in velvet. She placed it before him and unwrapped it. A sword. Not just any sword. Ice, reforged into 2 blades by Tywin's command, but one had been recovered from a Lannister convoy ambushed by Tully scouts. Robb stared at it. "Father's sword." "Half of it," she said quietly. "Enough for a king." He said nothing for a while. Then he whispered, "I fear I'm no king anymore. Just a man standing in a storm." She touched his shoulder. "Then hold the sword tighter." Far beyond River Run, in the burning heart of Dragonstone, Melisandre stared into the flames. "I see him again," she whispered. "The wolf who carries fire in his blood, the dragon who does not know his wings. He will rise, but not without a price." Behind her, Stannis clenched his jaw. "Then let the price be paid." It was near dusk when the first flames touched the northern supply lines. Raiders, cloaked in Lannister red but bearing no banners, had struck a key northern outpost along the Trident, torching grain reserves and slaughtering the watchmen in their sleep. The message was clear: King's Landing would not sit idle. When the news reached River Run, the War Council was already gathered. The air inside the hall was thick with tension. Robb stood by the table, one hand pressed to the map, the other clenched into a trembling fist. "They want to starve us," said Lord Glover, grim. "Cut our legs before we can stand." "We must strike back," growled Greatjon. "Let them feel what it's like to burn." "No," Robb said quietly, "not yet." He looked around the room, every pair of eyes on him. "They want us to lash out, to become the aggressor. But this is still a war of justice, of truth. We don't lower ourselves to their games. We outmaneuver them." Jon, standing at the edge of the council, crossed his arms. "And how do you propose we do that?" Robb turned to him. "We bring our truth into the light." The council shifted uncomfortably. Even Catelyn tensed beside her son. "You want to tell the realm?" she asked. "You'll paint a target on him larger than any crown." "He's already a target," Robb said, But if we speak first, we control the story, not Cersei, not Stannis." Jon exhaled slowly. "And what if the realm doesn't want me?" Robb met his eyes. "Then let them try and take you from me." Within a week, ravens flew from Riverrun to every major house in Westeros. The message was simple, bold, and signed by Robb Stark himself. "Jon Snow is not a bastard. He is Aegon Targaryen, son of Rhaegar and Lyanna Stark, born in wedlock and heir to the Iron Throne. He is under my protection and recognized as a true-born ally of the North." The shock was immediate. In the Vale, Lord Royce demanded proof and counsel. In Dorne, Prince Doran Martell read the letter in silence, lips curling at the name Rhaegar. In Old Town, Maesters debated endlessly, digging through dusty records and denied scrolls. In Dragonstone, Melisandre's flames burned brighter. "The Prince is revealed," she whispered, "the one promised, fire and blood." Stannis said nothing, but his fingers tightened around the hilt of his sword. At Riverrun, the consequences were swift. Some bannermen began to whisper that Robb had lost his mind, crowning a southerner with dragon's blood. Others stood firmly behind him, loyal to House Stark, trusting in his leadership even as they struggled to understand the path ahead. And Jon? Jon changed. He no longer trained in the yard. He no longer walked alone. He began meeting with the council, speaking with lords. His voice was still low, but his words carried weight now. Some began calling him my prince in private. He hated it. Late one night, Robb found him in the Godswood again, standing under the stars. "I didn't ask for any of this," Jon murmured, his breath frosting in the cold. "I was at peace. At the wall, I knew who I was. I had purpose." "You still do," Robb said. "A greater one. One father died protecting." Jon turned to him. "And if I fail, if I lead the North into ruin—" Robb placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then we fall together, as brothers." But not all brothers stayed loyal. Rose Bolton had been watching, waiting. The fear in the ranks, the unease among the bannermen, it was growing. And with every whisper of Targaryen, Bolton saw his opening widen. He met with his most trusted men in secret. "We swore loyalty to House Stark," one of them said, uneasy. "No," Bolton replied. "We swore loyalty to the North. Robb Stark would make us servants to Dragon Kings. I won't serve another southern ruler wearing a wolf's skin." He leaned in, voice like a blade. "It's time we remind them that northern blood does not bend." In the days that followed, rumors began to spread. Poisoned wine in campfires, dead ravens meant for dawn, scouts disappearing. Something was unraveling from within, and Jon, ever watchful, sensed it too. Snow began to fall over Riverrun, a quiet reminder that winter had not forgotten the realm, no matter how loud the war grew. It dusted the banners, cloaked the trees, and muted the sounds of training in the yard. But inside the walls, silence was not peace. It was tension, thick and suffocating. Jon paced in the library, reading dispatches from the Vale and Dawn. Support was uncertain. Doran Martell had responded with cautious language, offering only consideration. The Vale's Lord Royce was skeptical and demanded Jon appear in person. The North remained divided. Some thrilled at the idea of a Stark-backed Targaryen, others afraid of being dragged into another generation of southern chaos. Robb's once unified command was cracking. "You gave them hope," Jon said to Robb, as they sat by the fire that night. "But hope is fragile, and when it breaks, men turn to fear." "I know," Robb replied. "That's why we move now." He laid out a map on the table. "We march for Moat Cailin, secure the neck. From there we can meet any threat from the south or east. We need to show we're not just playing politics, we're still ready for war." Jon nodded, but his eyes stayed on the fire. "And Rose Bolton?" Robb didn't answer right away. In the dungeons below Riverrun, Rose Bolton's son, Ramsay, had been brought in shackled and half-starved, captured after one of the Lannister supply raids. He'd been found posing as a bandit. Robb had ordered him kept alive. He thought Ramsay might lead them to more traitors. But now, with Rose growing colder and more distant, the bastard son's capture weighed heavier. That night, Robb went down alone to see Ramsay. "You smile too much for a prisoner," Robb said, stopping outside the cell. Ramsay looked up, with a grin smeared in blood. "Because I know what you don't, little wolf." Robb narrowed his eyes. Ramsay leaned forward, chains clinking. "Your north is bleeding, your dogs are hungry, and one of them is already off the leash." Robb left without a word, but his fists were clenched. That same evening, in a side hall of River Run, Catelyn Stark found Jon speaking with a few of the younger bannermen. They asked him questions now, about Rhaegar, about dragons, about fire. He answered as best he could, though he barely knew the answers himself. After they left, she approached, cold as the snow outside. "You've changed this place." Jon looked at her, uncertain. "I didn't mean to." "No," she said, "but change came anyway. My husband died keeping you safe. My son now fights wars because of you. The North tears at its seams because you wear a name that was meant to be buried." Jon didn't flinch. "I never wanted the name," he said, "but I'll carry it if it means protecting Robb, protecting the realm." She looked at him for a long time, and for the first time didn't speak with hatred. "You remind me of your mother," she said finally, and walked away. At dawn, a fire broke out in the eastern barracks. Chaos spread quickly. Men shouted, horses panicked, and amid the confusion, 3 of Robb's senior scouts were found dead, their throats slit. It wasn't sabotage. It was betrayal. Jon burst into the war room where Robb was already donning his armor. "Bolton's men are gone," Robb growled. "They've fled in the night. The gates weren't forced. They were opened from within." Jon grabbed a sword off the rack. "Then it begins." By midday, ravens were gone, towers cleared, and the Bolton banners at their camp were aflame. The North had fractured. Again. That night, as Robb sat by the hearth sharpening his blade, Jon joined him silently. "Do you think this is how it ends?" Robb asked. "Us, fighting our own again?" Jon stared at the flames. "It ends when there's no one left to betray us." They didn't sleep. The snow fell harder now. The warmth of the fire felt distant. And beyond the walls of River Run, Rose Bolton prepared for the blood that was coming. 3 days passed before the first signs of Bolton's betrayal took form. A small village outside River Run, once loyal to House Tully, was found razed to the ground. The survivors hanged with traitor's mark carved into their chests. No gold was stolen, no food taken. It was not a raid, it was a warning. Robb stood over the bodies, his cloak flapping in the cold wind, eyes scanning the devastation with a grim silence. Jon stood beside him, hand resting on the hilt of Longclaw, his expression darker than ever. "He wants us to retaliate," Jon said, "to chase him, bleed for every village." Robb nodded. "He wants to scatter us, break us apart, then pick us off." Jon bent beside one of the bodies, a young boy, no older than 12. "He's not just fighting for the North, he's fighting to erase it." Back at River Run, the remaining bannermen debated furiously. Some urged immediate retaliation, others demanded they stay and fortify the stronghold, but every man agreed on one thing: Rose Bolton could no longer be considered a Northman. "He's a wolf wearing flayed skin," said Lord Glover. "And he's turned his cloak for good." Catelyn rose from her seat, slamming her hand on the table. "Enough! We will not let this treachery tear us apart." She turned to Robb. "You must act like a king now, ruthlessly." Robb's jaw tightened. "I know." He stood and looked around the table. "We march tonight. We hunt Rose down, not just for the North, but for what he's trying to destroy." Jon watched from the corner, nodding once. and I'll lead the vanguard." "No," Robb said. "I need you elsewhere." That evening, Robb and Jon met privately in the Godswood. The snow had stopped, but the air was bitter, sharp. "I need you to ride to the Eyrie," Robb said, voice low. "The Vale's support is uncertain, and they won't trust anyone but someone they see as noble." Jon raised a brow. "You're sending the bastard prince to sway lords of the Vale." "I'm sending the only man who might be able to speak to them without sounding like a warmonger," Robb said. "They know your story now. Use it." Jon hesitated. "And if they reject me?" Robb looked at him, his voice softer. "Then we know who our enemies really are." They clasped forearms like warriors. There was no need for farewells. They both knew the road ahead was stained red. Jon rode out before dawn, with a small company of riders and Ghost padding beside him. He didn't look back. As his silhouette vanished over the hills, Robb turned to his men. "Prepare the men. We march on the Dreadfort." But Roose Bolton was not waiting in his ancestral home. He had already moved, building a force deep in the Weeping Hills, forming alliances with bitter northern houses, minor lords with deep grievances, those who saw the Targaryen secret as a threat to northern purity. He called them the True North, and he promised them something Robb could not: a North without dragons, a North without kings in faraway cities, a North ruled by those born to the ice, not fire. Meanwhile, as Jon neared the Eyrie, his journey was interrupted by an unexpected face: Petyr Baelish. Littlefinger appeared on the road with a dozen armed men, his smile as thin and cold as ever. "Prince Aegon," he said with a mock bow. "Or, should I say Snow? Forgive me, these days it's hard to keep up with all the titles." Jon tightened his grip on his reins. "What do you want?" Littlefinger's smile didn't falter. "To help, and perhaps to see what side the dragon truly breathes for." Jon's hand crept toward Longclaw. "You'll want to hear what I know," Littlefinger said. "Especially if you ever plan to sit on that throne your blood screams for." In the distance, storms gathered over the north. The final game was about to begin, not just for the throne, but for the soul of the realm itself. And Jon Snow was caught in the center. The Vale loomed above the mists as Jon rode with Littlefinger's escort, their path twisting through narrow passes and icy ridges. The mountains felt ancient, watching him, whispering things he didn't want to hear, about blood, legacy, and the weight of his name. Ghost stayed close, eyes never leaving Baelish. Jon had no choice but to listen. "The Lords of the Vale respect legacy," Baelish said, his voice soft as silk. "But they despise uncertainty. Right now, your claim is more myth than truth. Robb's endorsement is a double-edged sword." Jon kept his eyes ahead. "Why help me?" Baelish smiled. "Because chaos is a ladder, and sometimes even dragons need someone to show them which rungs to climb." In the Ares' high hall, Lord Yonroy stood with crossed arms, glaring at Jon like a wolf stalked by fire. "The Vale will not be dragged into another southern war," he said, voice iron. "I'm not asking for war," Jon replied, standing firm, Longclaw at his hip. "I'm asking for justice. The man who now leads the Bolton forces betrayed my brother, burned northern villages, spilled innocent blood, and he'll march on you next." Baelish stepped in. "And what if Roose Bolton pledges peace? Will the Vale believe a flayer of men over the son of Rhaegar Targaryen?" Royce scowled. "We believe in proof." Jon pulled a dagger from his belt and slashed his palm. Blood spilled onto the stone floor. "Then test it. Maester, take my blood. Test it against any Targaryen relic you want. I won't run from the truth." It wasn't politics, it was pride, fire and blood, buried deep but now exposed. Lord Royce didn't answer, but he didn't turn Jon away. Back in the north, the war ignited. Robb's forces reached the Weeping Hills and found Bolton's men entrenched and ready. Flayed banners flapped in the snow. The first clash was brutal, steel against steel, brothers against brothers. Northern blood soaked into the frozen earth. Robb fought like a man possessed. Grey wind tore through enemy ranks, but for every man he cut down, Robb saw another rise with northern eyes. It was like fighting ghosts. At the heart of the battle, Rose Bolton stood calm as ever, blade red, expression unreadable. "You turned against your blood," Robb shouted across the field. "I turned against weakness," Rose answered. "The North does not kneel to dragons." They clashed like titans, swords rang, blood spilled. But Rose fought not to win, he fought to stall. And then, as Robb pushed forward, horns blared behind him. A second wave of Bolton men struck from the rear. The trap had been set. At the Eyrie, Jon stood before the moon door as the Vale Meisters returned with their findings. "Your blood carries traces matching House Targaryen's lineage," the Elder Meister confirmed, "as does your facial structure and known birth. A timeline. The evidence is too conclusive." Jon stared at the floor. "I never asked for this." Jon Royce stepped forward. "Perhaps, but now you must choose. Do you fight as Aegon Targaryen, or do you remain Jon Snow?" Jon looked up, and in his eyes fire danced. "I fight as both." Word reached the Vale that Robb was encircled, pinned between Bolton's armies. Reinforcements were needed, or House Stark would fall. Jon didn't wait. He called his new allies to arms. The Vale's knights, skeptical but bound by oath, followed him. Baelish watched with amusement. As they rode out, Jon whispered to Ghost, "We end this, one way or another." The final battle unfolded on the edge of the Wolfswood, where snow met steel and fire met ice. Robb's army, weary and bloodied, held the line as the Bolton traitors pressed in. Roose raised his sword, confident, but then the horns blared again, this time from the east. The knights of the Vale stormed down the hill, banners streaming. At their head rode Jon, black cloak whipping behind him, Longclaw gleaming. The Bolton flank shattered, chaos reigned. Jon and Robb fought side by side, carving through the enemy like a storm. And when Robb finally stood face to face with Rose, he asked only one thing: why? Rose, blooded and cornered, smiled coldly. "Because I knew what your father wouldn't. The North cannot serve two kings." Robb didn't answer. He drove his sword through Rose's chest. When the snow settled, the Bolton banners burned. Robb, wounded but alive, turned to Jon. "You saved us." Jon shook his head. "We saved each other." Weeks later in Winterfell, the banners of House Stark flew again. Robb ruled as king in the north. Jon did not take a crown, but he became something more. The bridge between north and south. A Stark in name, a Targaryen in blood. He refused the Iron Throne, but the realm knew his name now, and legends whispered of the bastard who united a broken kingdom, not by claiming power, but by refusing it. Fire and ice, snow and wolf. Jon,